Hello and welcome to the Shepheard Walwyn podcast series. My name is Jonathan Brown. Shepheard Walwyn is a campaigning book publisher based in London, England. Our purpose is to uncover and promote new ideas to society's oldest problems. And whilst our specialty is ethical economics, something Anthony Werner, our driving force for over 40 years, has pioneered, we have branched out over the years to other related areas such as the environment and the lives and works of society's change agents. These podcasts promote ideas we're convinced can actually help us build a better society for all of us. So have a listen and be sure to share with your friends if you like them, but also tell us what you think. These are debates we all need to be part of. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. My guest today is a welcome return to the podcast, and that's Tom Burgess, who is author of From Here to Prosperity. Now, we interviewed Tom a short time ago. Today, we're going to be going into more detail. So just to recap, and also for anyone who wasn't there for the first recording, Tom is Executive Director of the Progressive Policy Unit, and he also runs the Real Agenda Network, which is really worth looking out for. Now, before this, Tom was CEO of an international communications agency, and he's also been a journalist, broadcaster, and lecturer. And he's had a life really of being politically active and wondering why things are as they are and why can't we change them. So Tom, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Yes, it's good to be here, Jonathan.
So Tom, we in the first one you did go through some of the 5 key ideas that you had. I just wondered if we could get straight into the book. Now you talk about at the beginning of From Here to Prosperity, you talk about your intention, which is, and just if I can quote you back to yourself, you're hoping to persuade the reader that together we can build a fairer society that truly provides the opportunity for prosperity for everyone and encourages greater democratic engagement, and that you want to bring practical and simple answers to problems which for many people allegedly are intractable or unsolvable. And the whole essence of this book, really, so 200 pages book, is the essence of income for me and wealth for we. So I'm just wondering, where would be the best place for us to start to explain your ideas in more detail?
Well, I can certainly explain what I mean by income for me and wealth for we, and then the other things follow on from there.
Brilliant.
Because I started off with sort of proposing I wanted to create an agenda of 5 things. Not more than 5 things. In fact, I settled on 5 things, 5 policy actions that could be taken that were both, practical and positive, and could be implemented in a comparatively short time, or within the lifetime of Parliament. So I came up with the idea, an agenda for progressive prosperity, which is based on this, what I call an inequality busting strategy of income for me, wealth for we. So that means that we each keep the income we earn from our work, and we share more equitably the wealth that we all help create and jointly. So the key issue is that we all create the wealth. Obviously, the current system means that it is accumulated by a few. One of the ways that this can be done, to me the main way, is the tax system needs to be reformed to shift the base of tax from income to wealth, and and also to encourage greater social responsibility. Now, as you know, a lot of us, when we talk about tax, we're talking about income taxes. People say, "Oh, what's the tax rate?" And they're talking about their income taxes. And I think it's been shown that in the UK, only about half the tax paid on average for everything is actually income taxes, and the rest comes from VAT and council tax and excise taxes and so on, road taxes, comes from that. So half of it comes from other sources apart from income tax. Now, so a key way that this could be achieved to shift the base away from income to wealth, and we'll talk about the reasons behind that. Key way this could be achieved would be by abolishing income tax and payroll taxes for the majority of the population. And this could be easily covered, so it will be revenue neutral, by a greater contribution based on a small percentage of the asset value above a certain threshold of those who have accumulated significant wealth. And note the word significant. I'm not talking if you've got £100 in the bank or even a few thousand, or own most of your house, we would all be better off. So if it was a small percentage of the asset value above a threshold from those who have accumulated significant wealth, these are those with significant wealth, would still be better off generally, because the whole economy would be better and there'd be more opportunity. Now, more funds, by doing this, more funds would be brought into circulation, consumer demand would be boosted, and more jobs could be created, leading to the greater opportunity for all. Because when wealth is tied up, it's not doing anything. I know, some super wealthy people say, oh yes, well, it's invested in various projects, but it's still, the majority of it is just sitting there and in silos and not active. And above all, it's not being circulated. It may be invested in, sometimes in vanity projects. We've heard recently of billionaires wanting to fly into space, and the cost of them flying into space could have solved the entire homelessness problem in the US and more. And indeed, Richard Branson, likewise, of the UK maybe. But this is the problem. So we shift it away from income towards wealth. Now, this agenda that I propose, it's inclusive, it benefits everybody, and it's non-partisan. It's not a party political thing. It causes no hardship, and it could transform our society, which would bring sustainable growth and much greater social justice. So it's a simple concept, and I'm not necessarily, other people have proposed more taxes on wealth, and one of the organizations I'm involved with, Tax Justice Network, of which I'm an advisor to Tax Justice UK, are constantly promoting that it's better to shift taxes to wealth away from income, and others too, but trying to get the traction to do that, a lot of vested interests and not, that interested in seeing that happen.
In part one of your book, you asked the question, where are we now? And so I just wondered if we could get into that really. What are the key issues that you see that we're facing as a society? And that then I think would contextualize nicely the solutions that you've got to our biggest problems.
Well, exactly. And I think, what is most unfortunate is that when you look back over the years, and even you look back at, before I wrote this book and the years before, even going back hundreds of years, the situation hasn't really changed that much. There's been a few initiatives, and overall, and I'll just talk about the UK, it's because I was talking about the UK and the US in this book, but it does apply to other countries. We have improved things slightly. There is generally a better standard of living, but there is still extreme inequality and persistent poverty, and it shouldn't be the case. We are meant to be smart human beings, and yet we still go to war. We still have constant conflicts. There's been slow economic progress. And, even after the financial crash, very slow coming back. After the pandemic, it seems, initially it seems to be sort of quite quick, but I think there's a lot of other issues there, and also the Brexit issue from the UK point of view. But generally, it's been slow economic progress. And it's not all about growth for growth's sake. I think this is a very important issue. It's not we want growth at all costs. It's about well-being. But, economic growth can help improve well-being because it creates greater wealth for us all, and that can be used to improve well-being. So I'm not an advocate of growth for growth's sake. It's about well-being. But also we've damaged the democracy. The government isn't working for us. We see in the UK how far removed and how much, money and influence swings the day. It's clearly, in the book, it's clearly worse in the US, where money is everything, whereas a single election for a senator in Texas will, more money is spent on that than the entire general election in the UK, which has regulated spending. Admittedly, Texas is nearly half the size of the UK, but that shouldn't be the case. It's just crazy, the amount of money that's tied up in the American democracy and makes it very undemocratic. So this extreme economic inequality and persistent poverty is still continuing. So this is where we are. We've made progress on technology. We've made progress on health issues. and we've made some progress, but still, there is people that can't afford to live, and it shouldn't be the case. So we've got a situation where we're not making progress that we could do, and therefore we have slow economic growth, and certainly slow economic growth in well-being, and also the lack of democracy and the power of money is meaning that we're not adequately represented.
So you introduced something in the book, Tom, which is the 5-75-20 society. And I was really taken with that. I've never heard of that before. I just wondered if you could take the listeners through that.
Indeed, yes. I mean, because roughly 5% of our society are enjoying sort of runaway rewards at the top, as asset prices and returns on wealth increase significantly. US billionaires have seen, this is a recent figure, have seen their wealth surge 1.8 trillion during the pandemic. Their collective fortunes skyrocketed by nearly two-thirds, so 62% the last couple of years, a year and a half. And this is what's happening. So it's top-ended. So 5% are doing well, and this is not necessarily also just the super rich, but the people that are doing well. It's largely composed of professionals, those working in finance and property and successful entrepreneurs and so on, and those that inherit significant wealth, which is another issue. And then like 75%, either working or have a retirement income, but it's still relatively insecure, and people are anxious. This is the concerned middle, that people don't know. They don't have enough reserves. They're living from day to day. There's not only sort of blue-collar and industrial workers who may be threatened by outsourcing and so on, but it's groups of middle-class professionals who fear their jobs, may move to other countries. And I think that may actually be, whether that's going to still continue at the same rate. But, once, professionals that were once secure, such as academics, mechanical engineers and scientists, for example, are relatively worse off than their counterparts a generation ago. And whereas and then there's 20% at the bottom of society who are really struggling in a vicious cycle, where it's low wages, irregular work, unemployment, limited access to welfare, and so on. So these are like the outsiders. So really, there's only a very small percentage of people that are doing well. The rest are, struggling, or it's difficult. It's not smooth sailing, and they're very anxious. And then 20%, it's a complete disaster.
I was very moved by that, and not least because of how accurate it was then, but how it's even more accurate now, and some of the shocking impact that our response to COVID has had on poorer people. And there's an element of, you could almost call that, whether it was 75%, I don't know, but it's the Zoom class of people who can work via Zoom were doing okay, but everybody else, if you couldn't do that, then you had to go out, put yourself at risk, and you couldn't afford not to work. So then there was a spread of the illness and so on and so forth. But also as well, my guess is that the 20% has actually gone up over the last 18 months. I saw one figure coming in from Oxfam saying there's at least another 500 million had fallen back into poverty because of the decrease in trade as a result of the Western nations locking down their economies. But you also talk in that chapter about how government isn't working for us.
Yes, definitely, because I think, we don't have a representative democracy. The current voting system in the UK means that we get a government that most of us don't want. Admittedly, some people didn't bother to vote, but a minority actually vote for the government that gets in. And because we have the first past the post system, the average number of votes per MP is a lot higher for those that don't get, the smaller parties, whereas the bigger parties, it takes a smaller number to vote for them. So it's unrepresented. It's completely unrepresentative and totally out of date for today's society. And it wasn't that long ago that only landowners could vote, and women couldn't vote. We think, how crazy is that? How did we ever allow that? And one day we're going to look back on our voting system here in the UK and think, how did we ever allow that? It's so unrepresentative, and it doesn't get the answer, get the job done, and actually bring changes. And that's where we have to change it. It isn't just a key element is the voting system and our archaic parliamentary system. I did a podcast on Gavin Esler, and it was interviewing him, and we've done a few series with Gavin, and he made the point, and he knows, being the ex-BBC North America and also Newsnight presenter, he knows a lot of people, has met a lot of people, and written some good books, so check those out. But he said, we think that the UK is the British Parliament is the mother of all parliaments. It's not. Virtually nobody has an unelected second chamber. Why have we still got that? And at one time I thought, well, that doesn't really make a big difference. But yes, it does, because otherwise we'd have an elected second chamber that represented the country better. And also, literally, it's all, it's mainly full of old boys and girls who've been, nominated by their parties, and because they're allowed a certain number, and it's completely unrepresentative. So actually, the whole essence of changing the House of Lords, and I do know a few people in there, and one or two that I feel have been, put there because they were just a name that had done something good for the party, and others that have worked hard. But it's just out of date. So the democracy is not working for us, and also at the local level, it isn't either. The lack of interest in local authorities and the structure of local authorities, and the fact that local authorities do not have virtually any financial control. They say, oh, the council tax. No, it's a small part of the local authority income, and anyway, it all goes to central government, and you get some of it back. So they have very little control over the finances, and it's dictated to centrally. So there's a lot that's wrong with it is not a democracy. It has the resemblance of a democracy, but we're not getting these problems solved. So there's something wrong with it.
Yes, most definitely. And so very clearly then, so we've got extreme inequality, we've got slow economic progress, and because of and very closely linked to the inequality is what we're not getting is people spending money in their local economies and creating local prosperity, because it's increasingly going to a wealthy class who then, as you say, they invest their money, or they have vanity projects of flying into space rather than helping people. And you also demonstrate how that whilst we claim to have some form of democracy, it's clearly not working in practice. So in the next chapter, in Radical Rethink, you look at how to get from austerity to prosperity. But I would like to focus in the interest of time just on, you talk about tax as a toolbox, and how the principles that should underlie the tax system is that it should be designed as a whole in conjunction with the benefit system. It needs to be green and progressive. So I would say that it promotes pro-social behavior from individuals, but also from companies. You seek neutrality. So in that sense, is actually you try to have the you don't try to distort people's behavior by treating activity differently without good reason. And the reasons would be the pro-social nature of behaviors that you want to encourage. And you achieve progressiveness as efficiently as possible. I said this means relying on rate schedule of personal taxes and benefits rather than the inefficiently distorting the tax base to achieve redistribution. So what you don't do is you don't tax poor people only to give them back some benefit later. You actually just don't tax poor people. So I just wondered if we could start there and then start to get into the answers that you've got for solving these problems.
Well, yes, I think it is a pointless exercise taxing people that don't have any money because they can't afford to pay you or can't afford to pay their tax. And this causes them more problems and they get more into poverty. And then we have to, or they may already be they may be working even and still getting benefits because they've got special needs or whatever, or they're still getting benefits because they can't earn enough. And it's not just because, some people say, well, I should have worked harder at school. No, there's a whole society thing that you are you're privileged from certain backgrounds, yes, some people break out of it, but the majority find it very difficult. They don't have the parental guidance, they don't have the career guidance or encouragement from their teachers or the education system. So you get all these things that it becomes very difficult for people to do it themselves, and therefore the tax has to have a welfare aspect to it. And we could treat the whole thing as a whole, but that's what I can't understand, particularly with, say, council tax, because it is just, we've been sold the idea that council tax pays for local services, the bins are being emptied and things like that. No, it doesn't. It just goes into the pot. And, yes, some places are wealthier or others, or some cut their council tax because they're wealthier or whatever. But it just goes into the pot. So it's not just for to do the bins. I know that, and we all know that. But council tax only used to be paid by property owners. And then we were then trying to encourage the poll tax, which eventually became the council tax. And we were sold this idea that it was the council tax was to pay for local government services, hence it should be paid per household and so on. But of course, if you're renting a property, you gain nothing. If you own a property, okay, you're paying a mortgage, but basically you're gaining, and the value of your property goes up by the nature, primarily from the area you live in. So if that area gets a new school, or it gets even a new supermarket, the Waitrose effect, you get a new road or railway station, that increases the value of your property. And that is absolutely fine. But, therefore it's better that people are taxed. The tax is only related to people that own the property, and take everybody that's renting out of council tax. And would be a much better idea, and because these are more likely the people that do not have the money, and then it gives them more income to spend in the local economy and do other things. So it's just, and another example of where is stamp duty. There's been a stamp duty holiday, but what's the point of stamp duty? It's just because it's been a tax, it's been around, and it raises like 15 billion, which once again a small amount. Just get rid of it, because it actually slows down house movement. And they'll say, well, there's a lot going on now, even though the holidays, and yeah, because that's pent up demand. But it also stops people downsizing, because they say, well, I get a smaller house, but I want to get something else. I'm still going to have to pay 50,000 in stamp duty. So they think, well, I'll stay where I am actually, or and make some changes to it. So stamp duty is pointless. And if you were going to have stamp duty, it should actually be on the seller rather than the buyer. Because the seller, is the one that has the money. The buyer doesn't have the money. The seller's generally made some money on the property. So it's just illogical, and it slows down activity. It slows down house movement. It increases house prices.
Thank you for listening to the Shepheard Walwyn podcast. To explore these ideas further, be sure to visit our website www.shepheardwalwyn.com and join our mailing list for news and special offers. Check out our authors and buy the books to learn more. And you can also find us on social media. Links are also on the website. And if you like the podcast, please head over to iTunes or Spotify to give us a review. It's surprisingly helpful in getting the ideas out there. So until next time, keep reading